So when teams looked on paper and they said, well, who's this kid?
Yeah.
You know, I didn't run into problems until they came out and looked at me.
Yeah.
And then when they saw me, they were like, are you, this is you?
Hey everybody, what's up? Trey Wingo here. Welcome into another episode of Half Forgotten History. Look, as we all know, there are three phases to a football game. There's offense, defense, and special teams. And this postseason drove that home. Ask Buffalo. Ask Green Bay. Well, this week's guest is a guy who was the best special teamer I ever saw. I'm not talking returner. I'm talking special teamer. Kick coverage, punt coverage, blocking kicks, making tackles, being a gunner. The Bills' Steve Tasker. We sat down with Steve recently to talk about making his way, not as a receiver, his actual position, but making a mark as a special teamer extraordinaire. Steve, I guess let's start here. What would you now, at your age, with everything you've been through, say to you as a young kid of a minister traveling all over Kansas about how your career was going to play out?
I would warn myself about how hard it was, how, you got to work hard to get there. I mean, I knew when I was coming out of high school, I weighed like 147 pounds. I was small, I was frail, and, I was fast. I had some speed, but I knew there was a lot of things that I had to overcome. Most importantly, if I was going to play in the NFL, I was going to have to get physically strong enough to do it. And I think I'd warned myself about how hard that was going to be and how long it was going to take. And just, keep working hard at it. There's just no other way to do it. When I came out of high school, I just wanted to keep playing. So I went to a community college and I went to Northwest. I just took it step by step and kept advancing my career little by little. And I think I just warned myself not to get discouraged. Just keep on plugging away and working hard and let it happen. That's basically what I did.
Yeah.
But I'd warned myself how hard it was and how hard I was going to have to.
Well, again, you were never the physical specimen, you know what I mean? I'm sure at any level of football that you played.
Oh, yeah.
Were there ever coaches very famously, Carl Nassib was told by then Penn State head coach Bill O'Brien, look, you have a dream to play in the NFL, it's not going to happen. And then, of course, he went out and has gone on to have a really nice career now with the Raiders. Was there ever a coach that said to you along the way, whether in high school or JUCO or even at Northwestern, hey, it's great to have these aspirations, but understand it's probably not going to happen?
Well, I had a coach tell me, and I was in Dodge City Community College and was getting recruited by some places and stuff. And I had a coach tell me I think it's Fort Hays State University in Kansas. He said, I think you're just too small to play up here, don't you? I said, Coach, if you think so, that's fine. And I ended up playing at Northwestern University in the Big Ten. Yeah. But he just said, listen, I think you're too small, don't you? And
what did he expect? What did he expect you to say? Yeah, I think you're right. I'm going to stop doing all this shit because you finally shown me the light.
Yeah. Yeah, it was rough. That followed me. The way I looked was the problem in my NFL career. Yeah. In my career as advanced. I was a small, little, skinny white kid from a small town in West, rural town. And it followed me. And the story I famously tell is I was my first day as a Buffalo Bill. I got picked up off waivers late in the week. And it's Marv Levy's first game as head coach. And he's standing there in front of this group. They were 2-14 in 85. They were 2-14 or 2-14 in 84, 2-14 in 85. And in 86, they were like 1-8. And it was week 10 of the NFL season, November, right? And they switched head coaches. These guys were beat up. The Bills were beat up. They were downtrodden. Their morale was low. And Marv stands up in front of them on the eve before his first game as head coach. And he captures the room. Like he's prepared. He's an executive. This guy knows the numbers. He knows what's happening. He says, really captures, really great communicator. Say, wow, this is what an NFL head coach should look like. And then you can see the guys in the room perk up, say, wow, we got a guy now. We're not going to be 2-14 anymore, right? So, and he says, and by the way, too, because we're going to get better right away. We got a new player from the Houston Oilers, Steve Tasker. He's going to cover kicks for us tomorrow. He's a good player. Steve, stand up. So these guys are like, wow, who is this guy? New coach. Who's this stud? And they kind of turn around to look, and I stand up. The disappointment was palpable in the room. They could not have been, it was like I was a sixth grader And I won an essay contest, be a Buffalo Bill for a day. I mean, that's what I looked like. I was a little scrawny white kid. You know, I look frail, small, and, and so I fought against that my whole trip, my whole journey through the ranks. Even in high school, I looked like the ball boy, let alone at Northwestern University.
Well, and that's what I'm curious about. And we'll get to the Bills and how you got there, because all of that I think is hilarious and interesting. And it's such an inspiration to people that, just keep plugging. But when you were being told by Fort Valley State coach guy, not big enough to play here, how did you end up at Northwestern?
They found out about me and recruited me. There were some people, like Kansas State University football, they kind of wanted me to walk on. They kind of wanted me to show up. Nebraska, the old Big Eight, that's where I grew up, the old Big Eight conference, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and all those guys, Oklahoma State, Iowa State. A couple of those, they wanted me to walk on. And I only found out about that through the grapevine. I mean, no coaches came to visit me or anything like that. So I think Northwestern found out through whatever grapevine college coaches find out about people in the state of Kansas, broadcasters, guys who kind of keep their hand on the pulse of that conference. And there were some really good players in my junior college conference. I mean, Mike Rozier and Mel Gray were both in the backfield at Coffeyville University, Coffeyville, Kansas Junior College. I played against both those guys. They were in the same backfield, you can imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Players like that were sprinkled throughout that conference. So there was some feelers out there that made it known that there were good players out there. My name statistically and through word of mouth said, hey, this is a kid that played pretty good at this conference. So some of these schools were interested in Northwestern. Dennis Green had just gotten the job a year before.
Denny Green.
So Denny, put the feelers out there. Ron Turner came out and recruited me in Kansas, and I took a trip up there. So at least they knew what I looked like, when I showed up. And they said, yeah, come on up. And so I did. I took that I got that, and I got Western Kentucky. Took a trip to there.
Hilltoppers.
And I also took a trip to University of Northern Iowa. Yeah, and Northern Iowa. I went up there and took a trip there, which was kind of cool. So those three schools were interested in me. And, I picked Northwestern for obvious reasons. It's a great university. And I wanted to back myself up if I couldn't play in the NFL, which I didn't think I was keep plugging along, but I was like, listen, how long of a shot am I? I mean, I could see myself in the mirror every morning too. So you better have a good education and have something, at least you could work in Chicago.
Right.
If it didn't work
So
out.
When during your Northwestern campaign did you think, oh my God, I potentially might get drafted here?
I redshirted. I was there for 3 years. I redshirted my middle season, my naturally senior year. I redshirted that year. And in the spring of that year, the pro scouts came. It was pro day. And all the seniors and all the guys eligible came out and ran 40s for the pros and lifted and did all this stuff. And I had worked extremely hard to get strong enough and thick enough to play. When I came into college, I was a $147. My last year at Northwestern, I was 185 pounds. And it was all through just eating and working hard. And I was fit. I was fit. And my waist, I had a 30-inch waist and 26-inch thighs. I mean, I had a power plant, so I could scoot. And I had some explosions. So when they came in to time us and lift and stuff, and I was benching way over 300 pounds, I was running a 4.4, low 4.40. My vertical jump was big. And so I measured out physically, when teams looked on paper and they said, well, who's this kid?
Yeah.
I didn't run into problems until they came out and looked at me.
Yeah.
And then when they saw me, they were like, this is you? I mean, I had guys coming out. I had scouts coming out. And they'd take one look at me, and I could see the hesitation in them. They were like, whoa, wait a minute. Yeah. This is you on this, this is you, and then they'd time me, and I'd run the 3-cone drill and all of that. And they'd look at the time, and they'd look at me, and they'd look at me again, and they'd look at the time and say, you know what, can you run that again?
Yeah. Something's wrong with the watch? That this can't be? Is that what they're saying?
And I'd snap off another good time, and they'd be like,
all right,
because they knew if I timed out like that, they had to report it.
Correct.
And they were like, But they didn't want anybody to see what I looked
Right,
like.
right. Just show the numbers.
Yes.
All right.
So that's what I lived with.
So by the way, I don't know if there's a truer, and we're about the same age, okay? I don't know if anything defines of you being of a bygone era more than the next sentence that I'm about to say. You were drafted in a round that no longer exists by a team that no longer exists. I mean,
that is correct.
I don't know a better way to sum up how much things have changed than that. You were the 9th round pick. Again, does not exist anymore. To the Houston Oilers, a franchise that did not exist, but you were in the same draft class with someone that I've spent a lot of time with.
Right, Mike Golick. Yeah, Golick and we got drafted in the Oilers. Warren Moon, it was his second year coming up. Oliver Luck was his backup.
Andrew Luck's dad.
Mike Munchak, Bruce Matthews, Avon Riley, Greg Bingham. There were some guys still there. It was about a year or two after Earl Campbell went to spend a couple of years with the New Orleans Saints. Bum Phillips had left. They'd had one coach between the guy that was coaching there, Hugh Campbell. They brought Hugh Campbell down from the Canadian Football League to coach the Oilers because they felt like that would entice Warren to come down and play for the Oilers. Everybody wanted Warren Moon because he was a talent.
Yes, he was.
I mean, he was the dude. And he had all the physical traits. And once he went to Canada and proved he could play professional football, I mean, it was totally a racist environment that nobody wanted a black quarterback at that time. And there's no way getting around it.
It was
everybody shied away.
It was a horrible way of thinking.
And Warren had to go to Canada and prove himself. And then when he did, he said, "Okay, and I'll come down and play." Then teams were standing in line.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course now he goes and he's in the Hall of Fame because of his career, and he deserved to be. But he was the guy, and I came in, and the Canadian guys came in. That staff, a lot of them were from Canada, and in Canada, fortunately for guys like me, they had a lot of guys that looked like me in Canada that could play well. They had a lot of Canadian guys that looked like me, so they had no qualms about taking me in the draft. They didn't care what I looked like. They had seen guys like that in Canada play well. So I show up and. The Oilers draft 3 guys in my position. They drafted Mike Aku, me, and Willie Drury. And they had, kid Mike Kelly. I think Mike Kelly from Notre Dame, and they had Golick from Notre Dame, and Ray Childress was in our draft class.
Ray Childress, wow, what a player!
Yeah, so it was some guys, and but I was very fortunate. The Oilers had that staff because they'd seen guys who looked like me play well in another league. And said, well, they didn't get caught up in that. So I was very lucky.
So when did you realize that, okay, if I'm going to have an impact, I'll get some reps, but if I'm going to have an impact, I need to really shine on special teams. When did you sort of embrace that this is going to be who I am?
I'll tell you this, the surprising thing to me was everything was different back then, obviously, we've already said, but, we got drafted like on a Wednesday, Thursday, or like on a Wednesday, I don't know what day it was. And then like less than a week later, we're all traveling down to Houston for a mini camp. I mean, it was like 5 days later, we were in uniform, in, helmets and
pads,
T-shirts and shorts, but no pads, but we were down there. And the first day we go out there, I was shocked. Athletically, I fit in. I competed I got these guys athletically. Yeah. What I didn't realize that I didn't know, pardon my friend, I didn't know shit from sherbet ice cream about football. I didn't know. I mean, I line up in college. You line up and you run your route. Back then in the 80s, I didn't know you had to line up, and then I got to know where the safety is. I got to know where this guy and if this guy rushes, I got to do a different route. I had light years to go to learn about football. And I realized quickly that was going to keep me out of the league. It wasn't my athleticism, which was a shock to me. It was my knowledge of football that was going to keep me out. So right away, you start juggling, okay, how can I make sure I stick around long enough to learn enough? Yeah. And I was like, okay, I'll cover kicks. You got it. If that keeps me around, I'll do whatever I got to do to get to the point where I can learn enough football to get on the field on offense or defense.
Well, it certainly became your calling card, and so you sort of found your way into the Oilers with that draft pick, and that staff was able to use you. But then you get waived, and at that point, are you thinking, well, it was a good run. I had a year and a half. I mean, was that sort of, were you thinking that might be it?
No, I here's the thing. They waived me and they put me over what was called back then procedural waivers. Yeah. They told me point blank. We had Tim Smith, who's a wide receiver, and he led the AFC in receptions for a couple of years. Timmy Smith, he got hurt. And then Ernest Givens got hurt. It was my second year in the league. And they needed me to be – I got hurt early in the season, but I was healthy enough to come back and play. They needed me to play on Sunday. So they only had 3 moves they could use on the waiver wire for freebies where they didn't have to cut a guy and then bring him back. Right. So they didn't want to use one of those on me because of, nobody's going to pick Tasker up. So they waived me. They're going to put me on procedural waivers for 24 hours. And what that meant was I'd be waived. But then after the 24 hours, my contract kicked right back in with the Oilers. So they were going to sign me right back to the same contract. Monday of that week, this was Thursday night of that week, and the 24 hours started at 5 o'clock on Thursday. But Monday preceding that, Marv Levy had been hired by the Bills. They fired Hank Bulla, hired Marv Levy. Marv had said, hey, guys, we can't get better on offense or defense right away, but we can get better on special teams. If you see anything or you have any ideas, let me know. I'll listen. Thursday night, my name pops up over the waiver wire. The offensive coordinator from the Oilers the year before my rookie season was Joe Farragelli. He was the tight ends coach of the Bills that year. He goes to Marv and says, hey, Marv, they're trying to sneak him through. I know they like him. They need him to play. He's a good player, particularly on special teams. So he's on waivers. If you want to pick him up, he's available, and I know the kid can play. And Marv, you always think years later, Marv told me this years later. I always think by the end of my career, I was thinking, wow, Tasker's available. Yeah, let's sign that. I can't believe they're waiving him by that time. But that early in my Marv just goes, pick him up. I don't know him. Yeah, sure. Right? I was just a guy. Yeah. So they picked me up. And, then I show up and that 48 hours going from the Houston Oilers to the Buffalo Bills it's an epic tale.
Yeah, and
it's unbelievable.
And it literally changed your life in every way imaginable. So why don't we take our first break here? When we come back, we'll continue this episode of Half Forgotten History with Steve Tasker, one of the greatest special teamers in the history of the game, and what it meant and what he became and what the Bills became once he got there. Stay right with us. We're coming right back. The NFL Draft takes center stage this week with the Combine getting underway in Indianapolis. And for the second straight year, which is good and bad, Jacksonville has the number 1 overall pick. Last year, of course, they took quarterback Trevor Lawrence with the top spot in 2021. But this year, it looks like they'll go in the trenches, either offensive or defensive line, which would end a 4-year run of quarterbacks going first overall in the draft. Caesars Sportsbook has odds available for the first overall pick in the draft, and it does favor the trenches. Now, Michigan's defensive end Aiden Hutchinson opened in the top spot at plus 160, with Alabama tackle Evan Neal close behind at plus 200. But now that's flipped as Neal leads the way at plus 115, followed by Hutchinson at plus 205. Behind them, Oregon defensive end Kayvon Thibodeau, he's at plus 500, and NC State tackle Ikem Ekwonu is at plus 800. Liberty's Malik Wills is the first quarterback listed at 40-1, followed by Pittsburgh's Kenny Pickett at 50-1. Find more of Trey's trends at Caesar Sports on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube. All right, back with Steve Tasker now on this episode of Half Forgotten History. And so again, Marv built you up as you're going to be this thing, and everybody looked at you and said, that guy, really? But you arrived at a very interesting time in the history of the Buffalo Bills. You got there right when all the pieces were starting to click into place to become the team that we knew that would go to 4 straight Super Bowls. How early on did you realize we can change everything about what people think we are?
Well, that took a while, but like I say, I walked into that room on the night before Marv's first game as head coach. I walked into the team meeting in a hotel. I sat back in the back, but I walked in. Bruce Smith was in the room. Jim Kelly was in the room. Andre Reed was in the room. Marv Levy had just become the head coach and was about to embark on the career that put him in the Hall of Fame. And Bill Polian sitting in the back of the room.
Pretty good.
It's a pretty good group.
It's a pretty good group.
I'm still cashing that lottery ticket. I still cash that lottery ticket. I walked in. I was the first new player in Marv's regime. Yeah. So, but it took a while. And at the end of that year, it became obvious. Jim, early on, there were some bumps with Jim in his career in Buffalo. He came in. There's never been a player that arrived in any city at any time in any era with more expectations placed on them than Jim Kelly arriving in Buffalo.
Yeah, he had turned Buffalo down, wanted to go to the USFL, lit up the Houston Gamblers. I remember the whole thing.
And when he finally showed up, everything was pinned on him. The success of that franchise going forward was his and his alone. Now he got help from Marv and Bruce and all that, and I'll tell you, nobody ever came through in a bigger way than Jim did the next 11 years. But early on in his career, Jim knew that there were some pieces around him that they needed to change, and he was adamant about getting it done. When he was yelling and screaming at guys on the sideline, he was not putting up with bad routes. He was telling the coaches, you got to take that guy off the field and put that guy on the field. That guy stinks. I'm not going to go with him because he's given up on play. The whole thing. He was making waves, but the freaking guy backed it up, right? So he shows up, and Bruce the same way. Bruce was by himself on the defensive side for a while. Darryl Talley, and would hem Bruce in, and those two guys, Bruce and Jim, one on either side of the ball. There was some turmoil in that team before they actually turned the corner. 87, Jim's second year in the league, was a strike year. And we're like, So we're kind of getting it together, right? Then 88 comes, and something changed. All of a sudden, we're going 12-4, and we're busted loose. I mean, we had some guys.
You had the dudes.
And Marv and Bill had put together a roster with some quality guys around Jim, some quality guys around Bruce, more quality guys. They had an idea of the team. Because there was no free agency, you couldn't change all that fast. And they finally put it together. In 88's when we finally said, all right, we go to Cincinnati. We lost in the AFC Championship game. That's when it was like, okay, we've got the engine now. Can we make sure we fine-tune this engine and keep running down the road? We knew we had enough guys then.
So when you were on special teams, like you did everything. You returned kicks. You were a gunner. You made sure that the returner didn't go anywhere. You blocked punts. What was your favorite part of all those things? Did you like one thing more than the other in all those special team roles they put you in?
Well, there's nothing better than blocking a punt. That was good, but those are so few and far. Those are like a blue moon. You got to really time it right, and some things have to happen for that. I think on a consistent basis, though, I think everybody, and they've taken it out of the game a little bit now. But I think covering kickoffs is an absolute blast. I used to just love it. I used to love covering kicks. First of all, it's either the start of a game where it's let's go, man. Let's kick this thing off and go, or your team's just scored and some good things are happening. I was on a good team with a really good offense, so we kicked off a lot. And it was just fun to go down and bounce around down there and take guys on and take them out and get knife through, make plays and get field position. It was just fun. There's nothing like it. 80, particularly in your own building where, you just scored and, you get a chance to like put an exclamation point after a kickoff, force a fumble, something like that. I think for me, even though it's changed so much in today's game because of all the touchbacks and the player safety that happens, there's no wedges anymore. Right. You don't get it. You don't get to break a wedge, So kickoffs for me, was always a lot of fun. I loved doing them, and I just had a lot of great times because it was a lot of big contact, a lot of big train wrecks, but I always seemed to walk away from them okay. So I think that was just the fun part of it. Football's about making tackles and running the ball and try and do it, and that's a play that is stripped down to its very core.
Absolutely.
There's a guy with the ball, go get
right.
him.
You started getting a lot of attention for your special teams play. What was that process like? Because everybody wants to play and they want to be on offense, especially if you're, I want to score, I want to make catches, and you did that. But like you became known as the special teams guy. And when you started being recognized, I mean, like you went to 7 Pro Bowls essentially as a special teamer. That still is a very unique thing in the history of the NFL. What did it mean to have that mantle?
Well, it was cool. I mean, the better you play, the harder it is to play well because other teams scout you and they start doing things against you. And I've talked to other guys too, even current players. I'm sure Matt Slater's been through this where you can't even watch. It's almost a pointless exercise to watch film because everything they do against everybody else is never what they do against you because they don't think about other team and players like they think about you. So you're stuck with this new look every time. You're going out blind a little bit. And I remember going out and covering punts, and first of all, you go out there and you get a guy on you. It's like the backup strong safety is on you, like when I first get to Buffalo. And then after a few weeks of that, then it's like, okay, I got a strong safety, and then I get another backup safety on me. And those guys can't do it. And then the next thing, you get a backup corner and a better strong safety, right? And then after that, and you go through that process, they keep trying different guys. And pretty soon you get 2 starting corners on you.
Yeah.
You get the 2 guys that play down a distance, the best athletes, and they're on you. So you've come a ways. And then after a while, you get 2 guys on you, and then there's a 3rd guy running out from inside to knock you off as well. All of those things happen and progressively gets worse. I'll never forget. I think I get to my first Pro Bowl, and this was not because I was a great player. It's just the way the rosters are set up at the Pro Bowl. I go out to cover my first punt in a Pro Bowl, and the 2 guys on me, one is Darryl Green and the other's Ronnie Lott. So I'm like, okay, I can. So I'm like, well, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore, right? So you got Ronnie Lott and Darryl Green on you. It's like, man, oh man, that's a different animal. Yeah. But that's how it happened. You evolve through the other team's roster, and certainly it's an honor, and it's a tip of their cap to you for putting those guys on. Sure. You. But it makes your job a lot harder, no question about it. But that's how I knew that I was having good years, and I knew that the level of respect was rising because you were running through the roster. You weren't getting special teamers out there anymore. You were getting starting guys that were coming out to try and double team.
Well, listen, you were getting the recognition. The team was getting the recognition. And, you go to 4 straight Super Bowls. And I've said this a lot, and I've spent some time with Thurman and Jim and Bruce, and we talk about this a lot. I don't think people, outside of Buffalo, I don't think people truly appreciate how hard it is to go to 4 straight Super Bowls, having lost every single one of them. The Super Bowl hangover we talk about is real for a lot of teams and just that. But to go every time and find a different way to not come across the finish line, but still have the mental strength, to me, more than the physical strength, the mental strength to say, no, this time it's going to be different. I think it's one of the most amazing accomplishments in all of football that doesn't get its place in history that I believe it deserves.
Yeah, it was a special group of guys. And I think the mental toughness that you talk about and the atmosphere that Marv and Bill created with the guys in the locker room, and the fact that it was in that era helped because it was homegrown guys. We drafted them, we developed them. It was only 1 or 2 guys, maybe as free agents, that would sign with the Bills during that time, during the 4 Super Bowls. I don't know if I can – well, James Lofton would be the one that comes to mind. But for the most part, they were all guys that we drafted. They were all young guys who came up with Jim and Bruce and Thurman and Andre being the top guys in the game. And the mental toughness that happened during that run, sometimes, and let's face it, we were fortunate at times, no question. But the mental toughness that it took to get was sometimes the only thing that allowed us to win a game that helped us to advance. Otherwise, 4 straight Super Bowls don't happen because one game at the wrong time and you're out. The 4 years, whatever it was, 60-plus games that we played over the course of those 4 years, almost 70 games over the course of those 4 years, playoffs and regular season, one of those games goes the other way and it's all gone. You don't go back to the 2nd Super Bowl, or you don't go back to the 3rd Super Bowl, or you don't go to the 1st Super Bowl, because one game goes the other direction. And it's the mental toughness and the culture that helped us to win those, that singular game that helped us to keep it going. So, yeah, there's no question. It was a special atmosphere in that locker room and on that team.
Well, listen, you mentioned luck and, that mental sort of fortitude that you needed. That was never more on display than in the ultimate comeback in the history of the playoffs against the team that drafted you, the Houston Oilers. You guys infamously fall down 35-7 in the second half after
35-3.
Sorry, in the second half after that pick six, and you guys just went on fire. And this was without Jim. Frank Reich is in there.
Without Thurman.
And at that time, by the way, Frank Reich had held the record for the greatest comeback in the history of college football, and he was the quarterback at Maryland. It stunningly took down the U when the U was at the peak of its power with Jimmy Johnson. So take me through that game, because at that point when it's 35-3 and you're like, well, we got a backup quarterback in there. We don't have Thurman in there. It's been a good run. We've been to a couple of Super Bowls, but what were people saying on the sidelines of that game?
Really, and it was a little bit of nod to Marv and the culture. It was more about, for me, what I remember is the attitude was, and I think without ever having talked to guys, I think the prevailing attitude on our sideline was, okay, we've been to 2 straight Super Bowls already, and it was a good run. And it may be over today. Yeah. But Marv told us at halftime, he said, okay, whatever happens, just don't let anybody say you quit. So that's really basically the attitude. We're going to go out and finish. We'll play hard. We'll finish the game. We made the playoffs this year. Still, it's a pretty good, successful season, but we're going to finish up. We're going to continue to play hard. And we're going to finish this up like champions. We're going to go out and we're not going to lay down. This is a playoff game, and we owe it to the fans. We owe it to ourselves. We're going to finish and play hard. So there was that attitude of we're not quitting, even though the odds are against us, even though we know there's, a 1% chance that we're ever going to, win this game. We owe it to the run we've had and to ourselves to come out and finish this hard. So we decided, I think the prevailing atmosphere was, Trey, listen, let's just keep playing hard. That's all we got to do, and that's all we can do. And that was it. I mean, there were no expectations.
Yeah. Well, there were no expectations, but I mean, literally, if you had not made one first down or hadn't, it never would have happened. At what point? Because I remember the place started going crazy. Orchard Park started rocking like I'd never seen it before. At what point in the game, in the second half, did you guys think, we actually might pull this off?
There's stages of it, no question. But the earliest stage where I thought we captured the crowd back, we score and we go up, it's 35-10. After they scored the pick six, we come back out. And I've seen it a million times when a good team, even a good team, a great team, a championship team, takes their foot off the gas and playing the worst team in the league, it's bing, 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 touchdown. Right. And that's what happened to the Oilers. They knew that game was over. And their defense, they were out there going through the motions. And we, like I said, we continued to play hard. And it was like a 4-play drive all the way down, touchdown to Don Beebe. That's the play that he went out of bounds on,
absolutely.
Right? That he shouldn't have counted. Yep. So we score, and it's like, okay, whatever. Deep Beebs, famously in our locker room, Kenny Davis came to high-five Beebs. Beebs didn't even high-five him back. He left his boy hanging. It's like, forget it. We're just, so we were walking off. When the first time the crowd got into it was the next play, we surprised onside. That was a signal that it was a big F-U. We're not laying down. Let's go. The crowd's kind of, and they started to appreciate. They were like, wow. Thank you. We appreciate the pride that you just showed, knowing in a hopeless cause that you're not letting up after 2 Super Bowls. You're not going to lay down. We appreciate that. Crowd kind of cheered that recovery. And then, again, 2 or 3 plays later, we're in the end zone. And then everybody, the Oilers, their coaching staff, the Bills, our coaching staff, and every fan in the stands, and even everybody's looking at the scoreboard going, okay, 35, now 17. And they're starting to do the mental math of what's left. We're 18 points down, or whatever it is, 20, whatever it is. I can't even think. We're like 18 points down, 17 down. It's like, okay, they start counting, right? And then, the Oilers come out and their offense plays exactly like their defense did, and things just start to go back and forth, and we go down, we score again. We scored 3 touchdowns very quickly in that third quarter. And after you scored the third one, It's like, wow. Yeah, then it was on. It was on, and it just crescendoed with every passing score and every down, every good thing and bad thing that happened.
It was absolutely insane. And then, of course, you go, you take down, I think you went to Miami and take down the Dolphins in the AFC Championship game that year. And then you get to the Super Bowl. So you've lost 2 straight Super Bowls. You lost Super Bowl 25 to the Giants, infamously one of the greatest Super Bowls of all time. I'm not even going to say the words. Why? You know what? That one was a heartbreaker. Then you go back and, Thurman can't find his helmet in Super Bowl 26 on the sidelines, 37-24. You lose that one to Washington. Then you get Dallas. And this game could not have started better for you guys. Super Bowl 27, Rose Bowl. You come up with a block punt early in that game on Saxon, and you guys get an easy score. You have to be thinking at this point, this is it. It is going to be what we went through in the playoffs to get here with our backup quarterback, greatest comeback ever, and me doing this on the Super Bowl stage, what I do to set us up. You had to think at that point, it is going to be our time.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we felt, we were a really good football team, and we really felt because of the comeback game and because of the way the championship game went, down in Miami, we had really found ourselves offensively. We kind of felt like we were back on track. We had struggled at the end of the season, just kind of snuck in as a wild card. We had to go to Miami because they won the division. It was, we really felt, though, that we had got our mojo back with the comeback game and then with the way we played. I can't even remember who the divisional round was against, but we played really well up until, going to the championship game. And then to have it go so well early on in that game against Dallas, we felt like, okay, here we go, let's go. And as you know, Dallas wanted no part of it, and we started turning the football over, and we never recovered from it. We turned the football over throughout the entire game. We had like 9 turnovers.
They got 35 points off 9 turnovers.
If that doesn't speak to a team's collective mindset, I don't know what else does. I mean, I turned it over. I fumbled it once on a catch. We fumbled on a kickoff. Andre fumbled it. Thurman fumbled it. Beebs fumbled it. Every single guy who touched the football shared in it. And if that doesn't speak to what happens in a team mentality sometimes, that it's either a plus or a minus or whatever you want to call it, and either good things happen like it did in the comeback game, or bad things happen like it did in Super Bowl 27, it's real. And that's tangible evidence that something in our psyche as players, after being through what we'd been through to get to that 3rd Super Bowl, started to turn south on us. That's tangible proof that that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and then after that heartbreak, you find your way back. With Super Bowl rematch in Super Bowl 28, you guys are up at the half. You get shut out in the second half, and Thurman with the fumble that James Washington scooped and that really turned that game around. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. Post-game press conferences, they're always terrible for the losers because they have to sit there and take all these questions. Darryl Talley, God bless him. I'll never forget this as long as I live. Someone asked him deep down, what's it like to come to 4 straight Super Bowls and lose all 4 of them? And he gave the greatest answer I've ever heard in my life. He stared at the reporter and says, well, it's a bitch if you must know. And I was like, damn, I don't think anybody could have summed it up any better than that.
Yeah, no question. And we had to live with being, after being such a good football team, we had to live with being a laughingstock for a long time.
Which is such crap. It's such crap.
Until, that's the way it goes. Yeah. It's kind of what you sign up for. Yeah. You might happen. But we had to live with that probably until all of our guys were out of the league. Until, Bruce and then when they started, and I'll say this, when Marv went in the Hall of Fame, it began to change a little bit. And then Jim and Bruce and Thurman, Jim and Bruce being first ballot Hall of Famers.
Andre.
And Marv being a really kind of a first ballot Hall of Famer, said a lot about how football people perceive that team. And that started to change things quite a bit. But there's no question, there was a string of years, along maybe a decade, where you had to kind of live with it. And, we got, some people are like, really feel like they got to tiptoe around like, you don't want to say the words wide right to me in an interview. I think most of the guys on that team are okay with it now. You heal up because the respect that we've gotten as the years have gone by has increased to a point where we don't feel like a laughing stock. And the predominant memories we have of those 4 Super Bowls are the players and the friends and the relationships we have to this day.
Yeah, that bond.
And that's
that
cool.
bond will never be broken. Why don't we take our second break here? When we come back, we'll finish up here with Steve Tasker about the things that he's done after his playing days, including navigating a network through one of the most interesting times in Super Bowl history. Stay with us. Coming back with Steve Tasker. The NFL Draft takes center stage this week with the Combine getting underway in Indianapolis. And for the second straight year, which is good and bad, Jacksonville has the number 1 overall pick. Last year, of course, they took quarterback Trevor Lawrence with the top spot in 2021. But this year, it looks like they'll go in the trenches, either offensive or defensive line, which would end a 4-year run of quarterbacks going first overall in the draft. Caesars Sportsbook has odds available for the first overall pick in the draft, and it does favor the trenches. Now, Michigan's defensive end Aiden Hutchinson opened in the top spot at plus 160, with Alabama tackle Evan Neal close behind at plus 200. But now that's flipped as Neal leads the way at plus 115, followed by Hutchinson at plus 205. Behind them, Oregon defensive end Kayvon Thibodeau, he's at plus 500, and NC State tackle Ikem Ekwonu is at plus 800. Liberty's Malik Wills is the first quarterback listed at 40-1, followed by Pittsburgh's Kenny Pickett at 50-1. Find more of Trey's trends at Caesar Sports on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube. All right, back with Steve Tasker here on this episode of Half Forgotten History. So after your playing days are over, you navigate into the broadcast booth, spent many years at CBS, and you found yourself in one of the most unusual situations of all time. Super Bowl 47 in New Orleans between the Niners and the Ravens, and out of nowhere, power failure at the Superdome. What was your initial reaction when that happened?
I said it was interesting because I didn't know what was going to happen. Nobody knew what we were able to do technologically and what we weren't, because there was some power, but not enough. Right. Jim and Phil in the booth, they were out. Nobody could talk to them. Sidelines, and this is because of things that had happened in the past, we had hardwired mics and wireless IFBs. The hardwired mics were working. The wireless stuff was not. So my A2, and sure. What I'm talking about. My A2 was Vic. Victor says, hey, and he's talking, and Lance Barrow, bless his heart, in the truck is, you could hear the bricks hitting the floor of the truck, man. They didn't, and Vic, my A2, he's got hardwired headphones. He's got the big, headset, and he's talking. He goes, and he looks at me. He goes, "You can hear Lance, right? You can hear Lance, right?" And I go, "No, I can't hear anything." Yeah. And he gets this look on his face like, "Oh gosh!" So he takes his headphones off and gives them to me. Just puts them on my ears. Yeah. And then I could hear Lance. He goes, "Hello, everybody. Who can hear me?" And I said, "Lance, this is Steve Tasker. I hear you now." He goes, "Steve Tasker, you can hear me. All right. Listen, here's what we're going to do." Because he's from South Texas and stuff. He's like, "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to come out of commercial. You're going to tell everybody what happened, and we're going to show them the video, and we're going to go right back to commercial. You got me?" I go, "Lance, I got it. No problem." He goes, "All right, hold on." And he clicked off, and I know he's screaming in the truck, telling him we're going to – he comes popping on just about this long. It took him – it's all the time we had. He goes, "All right, Steve Tasker, you're going to take it out of commercial in 5, 4, 3 – That's all the notice I got. And so, I come out. I had no monitor. I had nothing to go by except Lance in my ear as I spoke. He says, "We're showing him the video," that kind of thing. He says, "I got to take it back." So that's about all the break. And of course, in retrospect, it's live TV, Trey. You've done it decades like I have. you probably never come off live TV thinking, I wish I could have had one more. If I'd have done it one more try, I could have done a little better. Yeah. You can think about how massively I think about that moment, that I could have done better than I did if I just had a few more nuggets of truth that I knew that I could could share. Nobody knew anything, me most of all. And so they come back, and once they go to break for another 2 minutes, they roll out the studio guys. Solomon Wilcots gets his headphones on, so I got Solomon to interact with, and then we go on, and the whole team takes over from there. And it was, I just got us out of break and got us back to break. But it was great. I'm glad that I know this too. Of all the things I did at CBS, for the catastrophic way that sounds, that we got a power outage in the Super Bowl, I was pretty proud of the way our crew handled it.
Well, you should be.
It was great.
Steve, you should be. And I'll tell you, I was at the game. I had brought my son and a bunch of his friends as a high school graduation present. So, I didn't see it till later. By the way, side note, terrible situation there. I'm up in the Detroit Lions booth with a friend of mine. My son and his friends are down there in the tickets. The power goes out. Then dad mode kicks in. I'm like, holy hell, what is happening here? I'm responsible for 3 other human beings. I got to get to them somehow, some way. But my point being, I didn't see what you did until after I'd gotten back and we were back at ESPN and watching. You were remarkable in that situation. You really held the broadcast together at a very critical time. So I don't want people to I don't want you to gloss over that. What you were able to do under the most difficult of circumstances, to me, was one of the best things I've ever seen in sports television.
Well, I appreciate those kind words. That but there's if I'd have had it to do over again, I would have calmed people down a little bit more than I did, because you forget at a venue like that, power goes out, whatever, you're looking for smoke, you're listening for a boom, right? You're looking for a commotion, something happened. There's and I say a terrorist act.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
Right. So I wish, because I was really thinking back on it. I'm really shocked that I wasn't asked to say something about it, because there was no panic, really no panic in the stands at all, because there was no event that went a long way. There was no pop. Right. There was no loud noise. There was no gunshots in the distance. There was no crazy man doing something. It was just, I was like, hey, folks, I know if any of you have loved ones here at the Super Bowl, just know this. There is no sense of panic. Yeah. There was no event. There was no smoking gun. This is like we're all in our rec room and Uncle Lenny leaned against the light switch. So just let's take a breath.
No.
I wish I would have said that. It would be hard to but like even you, Solomon Wilcots, he was like telling his A2, just, we got to get out of here. Something happened.
Yeah.
And so there was, that thought, and I never really communicated that to the people watching or whatever, but I was shocked that in the day and age in which we live, that the joint stayed as calm as it did.
Yeah, it really did.
Is 80,000 people, and at least 1% of them are like trigger happy, right? I mean, they're like going, oh my God. Yeah. But none of that came out. I was shocked at how calm the entire joint stayed. Yeah.
Well, I think what you did was a big part of that.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe, but it was something.
The debate rages on all the time. Oh, special teams guy, that means you're not a starter. Well, it's a part of the game. And my thing is, if it's a part of the game and you're the best at it, then it should be recognized in the Museum of Football. Like Ray Guy finally got in as the first pure punter. We've only had a couple of pure kickers get in. I don't think that just because of what you did, it should be. If you're the best at something in football, then you should be in the Hall of Fame. That's my opinion. Where are you on this journey?
I mean, it's an honor. I mean, to be in that conversation. I mean, it's humbling, and I treasure it. I do. I know this too. I came into the league just after the era, and I call it maybe the golden era of special teams began, when the rosters on game day got to be 46, 47 guys. And all of a sudden, that era began where every team had a position group of special teams players. You have a position group of wideouts. They have a room. They got, you got D-line room, the linebacker room, the defensive back room. Special teams guys are a position group. And they became that during the era just before and right when I came into the league. You have a group of guys that are on the team to play those plays. And that's their job. And they're professional special teams players. And it's been that way ever since. And I think, and my heart's been warmed by the reception and the way I was treated during my playing days, and even now by Jim Kelly, Bruce Smith, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, Kent Hull, Darryl Talley, the guys who played regular down and distances for our team have always treated me and the guys that I played with on special teams as equal members and contributors to a team that was really good. They have always done nothing but been supportive of me personally, and guys like me, Mark Pike and Carwell Gardner and Chris Hale and guys like that. I know on our team, we felt appreciated, respected, and I know we contributed in a lot of ways to the success our team had. So I know that there's a debate raging, and you get into snap counts about how can a guy who played 20% of the snaps, which is what special teams are. They're about 1 in every 5 snaps is a special team snap. But there's, the special teams plays are weighted. It's the play when you give the ball to your opponent willingly. Yeah. You got to punt it to him.
I mean, like by that nature, no punter or kicker should ever be in.
Right. And also you give the ball to your opponent. Field position, which is, a staple of success in the NFL, is dictated by that play. And it's a direct try for points. If you got a kicker like Jan Stenerud or Tyler Bass or Justin Tuck, I mean, that's money. Yeah. That's points. So those special teams, 20% of the plays that are special teams, they're heavily weighted in how successful the other two sides of the football, the offense and defense, are going to be. And with professional special teams players on your team, it's hard to argue that there's not a lot in there. Yeah. It's hard to argue about their importance without coming out on the side that, they're pretty important.
Well, look.
So I get the debate, no question about it. And I know this too. When I was coming up through my playing days, and the old guys would poo-poo special teams, even the old players would poo-poo special teams because they came from rosters that were 36 guys. Their roster had 33 guys suited up on game day. Yeah, I mean, everybody played special teams back then. And it was your defensive line was taking a breather on special teams because they'd cover the kick and hope the guy kicked it out of bounds. It's different now.
Completely.
And teams that win use all 47 guys on game day. Yeah. All of them.
What?
And so all 47 of those guys are contributing.
Well, look, I don't have a vote, but if I did, Steve Tasker would be a Hall of Famer.
Well, I appreciate it.
I've always appreciated watching you play, and I've loved your broadcasting career afterwards. And the stories about the Bills never get old for me because I just don't think – I think we're getting there, but I don't think yet people understand what it was like to do what you guys did, 4 straight Super Bowls, the only team in the history of Super Bowls to do it, and to be on the losing side of all of them just speaks to the mental strength that we talked about. Steve, always a pleasure to catch up with you, man.
Trey, I appreciate it.
Best of luck, and we'll see what happens going forward, all right?
Trey, thank you so much, and I'm a fan of yours too. I've watched you for a long, long time, and I appreciate being on with you. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, brother. Thanks once again to Steve Tasker. Really disappointed that he didn't find his way into the Pro Football Hall of Fame on his last year on the ballot. We'll see what happens if he goes the veterans route. But coming up next, what if you have a brother, and it's a twin brother, and you both went on to exceptional careers in the NFL? That's next week's guest, Tiki and Rondé Barber on Half Forgotten History. Oh, we had a time. We'll see you then.